The Starweaver's sensors blared to life, startling First Officer Zara Voss from her meditation. Her iridescent scales shifted from peaceful blue to alert amber as she rushed to the command center. The ship's AI had detected something unprecedented, signs of advanced civilization on a Class 13 Deathworld. "Captain Nix," Zara called out, her crystalline voice tight with urgency. "You need to see this." Captain Nix Vela emerged from her quarters, her metallic exoskeleton gleaming under the ship's bioluminescent lighting. As a member of the silicon-based Astrati species, she found the concept of carbon-based life surviving on Class 13 worlds almost inconceivable. "Show me," she ordered, settling into her command chair. The holographic display materialized before them, showing a blue-green world wreathed in swirling storm systems. Lightning crackled across whole continents, while massive geological upheavals reshaped the landscape in real time. The planet's gravity was crushing by galactic standards, its atmosphere a toxic soup of reactive gases, and its weather systems would tear most spacecraft apart. Yet there, scattered across the surface like diamonds in coal, were unmistakable signs of civilization. Sprawling cities, transportation networks, and even primitive spacefaring vessels. "Impossible," breathed Dr. Kern, the ship's xenobiologist. His tentacles writhed in agitation as he analyzed the data. The atmospheric pressure alone should prevent any complex life from developing. The gravity would crush most known species, the temperature swings between extremes that would shatter molecular bonds. And yet, Zara gestured to the display. There they are. Captain Nix studied the readings with growing fascination. In her 3 centuries of exploration, she had never encountered anything like this. Class 13 worlds were classified as absolute death zones, planets so hostile that even microorganisms struggled to survive. They were used as cautionary examples in academy training, places to be studied from a safe distance and then avoided. What kind of beings could not only survive but build a civilization in such conditions? She wondered aloud. "Captain," called out Senior Technician Mira from her station, her bioluminescent patches pulsing with excitement. "I'm detecting artificial signals emanating from the surface. They appear to be communications. Can you decode them?" "Working on it now." The patterns suggest a complex language structure. Multiple languages, actually. They're broadcasting on various frequencies, everything from primitive radio waves to quantum entangled transmissions. Captain Nix's sensory filaments tingled with anticipation. This was the kind of discovery that defined careers, or ended them. First contact protocols were clear, but they had never been designed with Class 13 inhabitants in mind. "Zara, assemble the senior staff in the conference room. Dr. Kern, I want a full analysis of how any species could possibly survive in these conditions. Mira, keep working on those communications. We need to understand what we're dealing with before we make any decisions." As the crew dispersed to their tasks, Nix remained on the bridge, watching the deadly world spin below them. Something about this discovery felt momentous, as if they stood on the brink of a paradigm shift in their understanding of life itself. Hours later, the senior staff gathered to discuss their findings. Dr. Kern's presentation painted a picture that seemed to defy every known law of biology. "The beings down there," he explained, his tentacles gesturing at the holographic models, "appear to be carbon-based life forms. But they've evolved characteristics that should be impossible. Their cellular structure must be incredibly robust to withstand the gravity. Their biochemistry would need to process the toxic atmosphere. Their nervous systems would have to cope with constant electromagnetic disruption from the storms. Could they be artificial constructs?" suggested Zara. "Some kind of automated system left behind by another civilization." Mira shook her head, her bioluminescence flickering with certainty. "The communications we're intercepting are too organic. They show emotional patterns, cultural references, artistic expression. These are thinking, feeling beings." "What do they call themselves?" Captain Nix asked. "Humans," Mira replied. "They call their world Earth. And Captain, They know we're here. The conference room erupted in surprised murmurs. Their cloaking technology was among the most advanced in known space. How could a species on a Class 13 world have detected them? They've been broadcasting a message on a frequency that exactly matches our ship's quantum resonance, Mira explained. It's as if they analyzed our technology and found a way to reach us specifically. The message is simple. Welcome, travelers. We come in peace and offer friendship. Please respond. Captain Nix felt her crystalline structure vibrate with excitement and apprehension. These humans had not only survived conditions that should have been impossible, but they had also managed to detect and analyze their ship despite its advanced cloaking. What other capabilities might they possess? Prepare a response, she decided. These humans have already demonstrated remarkable abilities. Perhaps it's time we learn just how remarkable they truly are. As the Starweaver's crew crafted their reply, none of them could have predicted how this encounter would reshape their understanding of life, survival, and the very limits of possibility. The age-old question of what makes a species truly advanced was about to be answered in ways they never imagined. On the bridge, Captain Nix watched the storm-racked planet below, its harsh surface somehow less threatening now that she knew it cradled a civilization that had mastered its cruel environment. First contact was always a delicate dance, but this one promised to be unlike any in galactic history. The message they would send was simple. We return your greeting of peace, people of Earth. You have achieved what we thought impossible. We have much to learn from each other. The Starweaver's diplomatic shuttle underwent its 15th modification, as Dr. Kern fretted over the environmental systems. The vessel's hull had already been reinforced to withstand Earth's crushing gravity, but the atmospheric composition remained a concern. The slightest breach in our containment field would be catastrophic, he explained to Captain Nix, his tentacles weaving complex patterns of worry. Their atmosphere contains highly reactive oxygen in quantities that would corrode most of our equipment in minutes. Not to mention the water vapor, added Zara, checking the structural integrity readings for the 100th time. Liquid water everywhere, Captain. Actual H2O, just falling from the sky. The humans had designated a landing zone in a region they called Geneva, chosen for its relatively stable weather patterns. Relatively stable, Captain Nix noted, meant only occasional electrical storms and minimal seismic activity. Final systems check, she announced to the landing party. Each member had been chosen not only for their diplomatic experience, but for their physical resilience. Even so, they would be relying heavily on their environmental suits, each customized to protect its wearer from Earth's hostile conditions. The descent began smoothly enough, but as they penetrated the upper atmosphere, the shuttle began to shudder violently. Warning indicators flashed as they encountered wind speeds that would qualify as catastrophic on most civilized worlds. Multiple turbulence patterns, called out the pilot, her photosynthetic skin flickering with stress patterns. The humans call this light chop. Through the viewport, Nix watched in amazement as civilian aircraft, primitive by their standards, navigated these same conditions with apparent ease. Some were little more than metal tubes with wings, yet they sliced through the turbulent air as if it were nothing unusual. As they broke through the clouded layer, the true scale of human civilization became apparent. The city below sprawled across a valley between towering mountains, its buildings a mix of architectural styles that suggested centuries of continuous development. Most shocking was how exposed everything was. Minimal shielding against the elements, structures built right out in the open air. Their shuttle settled onto the designated landing pad, its compensators straining against Earth's gravity. Through the reinforced viewports, they could see the human delegation waiting to greet them. They stood casually in the open air, wearing only thin layers of cloth covering, seemingly unconcerned by the atmospheric pressure that would crush most species. Environmental readings are confusing, Dr. Kern reported, examining his instruments. The humans appear to be actively processing the toxic atmosphere, extracting the corrosive oxygen, and somehow using it for energy production. Their cellular structure must be incredibly sophisticated. Captain Nix activated her suit's field and stepped toward the airlock. "Remember your training," she instructed her crew. "No sudden movements, maintain your protective fields at all times, and most importantly, show no fear. We represent the entire galactic community." The airlock cycled, and Earth's full fury hit them like a physical force. Even through their protective fields, they could feel the planet's tremendous gravity trying to pull them down. The air itself seemed alive with electrical potential, and the moisture content was high enough to register as a hazard on their environmental sensors. A human stepped forward, tall, dark-skinned, and moving with an ease that seemed impossible under such conditions. "Welcome to Earth," she said, her voice carrying clearly through their translation fields. "I am Dr. Sarah Chen, Chief of Diplomatic Relations. We hope your journey wasn't too uncomfortable." Too uncomfortable. They had just traversed conditions that would tear apart most spacecraft, and she spoke as if discussing a casual commute. "We are honored by your welcome," Captain Nix replied, her translator converting her crystalline harmonics into human speech. "I am Captain Nix Villa of the Starweaver, representing the Galactic Exploration Federation." Dr. Chen smiled, a gesture they had studied, but still found fascinating. "Please, follow me inside. We have a climate-controlled environment prepared according to your specifications, though I hope you'll forgive us if it's not quite what you're used to. We had to improvise some of the gravity reduction technology." As they followed her toward a massive structure, a low rumble shook the ground. The alien delegation froze, their danger sensors screaming alerts, but the humans didn't even break stride. "Just a small tremor," Dr. Chen explained casually. "The Alpine fault line has been a bit active this week. Nothing to worry about." "Nothing to worry about." Captain Nix exchanged glances with her crew. They had just felt the planet's crust shifting beneath their feet, an event that would trigger planetary evacuations on most worlds, and the humans dismissed it as a minor inconvenience. Inside the building, their sensors registered a slightly more manageable environment, though still far from what any of them would consider comfortable. The humans had clearly gone to considerable effort to accommodate their visitors, yet they themselves seemed perfectly at ease in conditions that defied conventional biological limitations. "We have so many questions," Dr. Chen continued, leading them to a conference room. "But first, please, tell us about your worlds. We've long wondered what life might be like among the stars." Captain Nix settled carefully into a reinforced chair, acutely aware that even here, every moment on this planet required constant vigilance against its natural forces. Yet as she began to share stories of the galaxy, she couldn't shake the feeling that they, the supposed advanced civilization, were the fragile ones here. The humans listened with genuine interest, but there was something in their expressions that hinted at barely contained excitement, as if they were children being told a fantastic tale. It wasn't until later that Nix understood why, to them, the galaxy they described sounded impossibly gentle, almost boring in its stability. As the diplomatic meeting continued, one thing became increasingly clear. They hadn't come to teach these humans about surviving in a harsh universe. They had come to learn from the masters of survival themselves. 3 days into their diplomatic mission, Dr. Kern burst into Captain Nix's temporary quarters, his tentacles writhing with agitation. "Captain, you need to see this. The humans, they deliberately expose their young to microorganisms." Nix's crystalline structure vibrated with concern. "They what?" "They call it building immunity. They intentionally allow their children to encounter harmful bacteria and viruses in controlled amounts. It's part of their development process." This was just the latest in a series of shocking discoveries about human society. The past several days had been a constant stream of revelations that challenged everything they thought they knew about survival and adaptation. Dr. Sarah Chen had been leading their cultural orientation sessions, each one more astonishing than the last. She sat now in their reinforced conference room, calmly sipping a beverage that would have dissolved the internal organs of most galactic species. "You have to understand," she explained, that what you consider extreme conditions are simply our normal environment. We evolved alongside these challenges, adapted to them. They shaped who we are. Zara, who had been studying human historical records, spoke up. But your species nearly destroyed itself multiple times. Wars, environmental disasters, plagues, yet you not only survived but seemed to grow stronger. Adversity breeds innovation, Sarah replied with a slight smile. Every challenge we faced forced us to adapt, to think differently, to push our boundaries. The humans had shared their historical archives, and the contents had left the alien delegation stunned. Stories of individuals surviving conditions that should have been instantly fatal. Tales of communities rebuilding after devastating natural disasters. Accounts of humans deliberately climbing mountains where the air was too thin to breathe, diving into crushing ocean depths, and venturing into frozen wastelands, not out of necessity, but for something they called adventure. Yesterday, Captain Nick said, I watched a human child fall, scrape its external membrane. Sorry, its skin, and simply continue playing after what you call a bandage was applied. On my world, any breach of the external protection layer would require immediate medical stasis. Sarah nodded. Our bodies are constantly repairing themselves. We evolved rapid healing because we had to. A species that needed medical stasis for every injury wouldn't have survived Earth's conditions. The dialogue was interrupted by another tremor, stronger than the previous ones. While the alien delegation activated their emergency protocols, their human hosts barely seemed to notice. One of them even made a joke about the Earth moving. Later that day, during a tour of a human research facility, they witnessed something that perfectly encapsulated the difference between their civilizations. A containment unit had failed, releasing what the humans classified as mildly elevated temperatures, hot enough to melt several of the aliens' environmental sensors. Instead of triggering an evacuation, a human engineer simply pulled on what they called protective gear, lockably thin by galactic standards, and walked into the superheated area to fix the problem. She emerged minutes later, sweating but unharmed, as if she hadn't just casually survived conditions that would have killed most species in seconds. Your tolerances are extraordinary, Dr. Kern commented, reviewing the sensor logs. The temperature in that chamber was high enough to denature most proteins. Oh, humans are remarkably adaptable to temperature extremes, Sarah explained. We can survive anywhere from about -50 to +50 degrees Celsius with minimal protection. Some trained individuals can handle even more extreme conditions. The aliens sat in stunned silence, processing this. The range she had just casually described spanned conditions from flash freezing to protein denaturing, and she had called it minimal protection. During their evening debrief, Captain Nick struggled to organize her thoughts. Their entire approach to existence is fundamentally different from ours, she told her crew. Where we seek to create perfectly controlled environments, they simply adapt to whatever environment they find themselves in. Where we see insurmountable hazards, they see challenges to overcome. It goes beyond physical adaptation, Zara added. Their art, their literature, their entire culture is built around this concept of pushing boundaries. They celebrate those who venture into the most dangerous conditions. They have recreational activities that deliberately court what we would consider lethal danger. Dr. Kern had been unusually quiet, his tentacles moving in the pattern that indicated deep thought. Captain, he said finally, I believe we need to reconsider our entire classification system. We labeled Earth a death world based on our standards of what life needs to survive. But look at what it produced. A species so incredibly resilient that they view conditions we consider catastrophic as merely inconvenient. The implications were staggering. How many other worlds had they dismissed as uninhabitable that might harbor equally remarkable forms of life? How many potential civilizations had they overlooked because they measured habitability by their own limited standards? As if to punctuate their discussion, a massive electrical storm broke out over the city. The aliens watched in amazement as humans went about their business under skies torn apart by lightning, protected by nothing more than simple meteorological forecasting and basic lightning rod technology. Perhaps, Captain Nix mused, watching the humans move confidently through what her sensors insisted was a lethal environment. We have been asking the wrong questions all along. Instead of asking how they survive here, we should be asking, what else might they be capable of? The answer to that question would soon prove more remarkable than any of them could have imagined. The seismic sensors aboard the Starweaver detected the danger first. What started as minor tremors quickly escalated into something far more serious. Captain Nix was in the middle of a diplomatic briefing when the emergency alerts began blaring. Multiple tectonic plate disruptions, Zara reported, her scales shifting to emergency red. The fault line under the city is showing signs of imminent. The ground lurched violently. Even through their protective fields, the alien delegation could feel the savage power of Earth's geology in motion. Buildings swayed in ways that defied their understanding of structural engineering. Evacuation protocols. Nix ordered her crew, but she stopped short when she noticed Dr. Chen calmly accessing the computer terminal. "No need for evacuation," Sarah said, her fingers flying over the interface. "This is only a 7.2. Our buildings are designed to handle much worse. Though we should probably move to the emergency command center. We'll have better monitoring capabilities there." Only a 7.2. The aliens exchanged looks of disbelief. The energy being released could level cities on most worlds, yet the humans treated it like an inconvenience. The emergency command center was a hive of coordinated activity. Humans moved with practiced efficiency, their actions clearly rehearsed but adaptable. Screens displayed real-time data from throughout the region. Structural integrity reports, population movement, emergency response deployment. "Tsunami warning for the coast," someone called out. "Wave height estimated at 15 meters. Dr. Kern's tentacles coiled in horror. 15 meters of liquid water. Moving at high velocity. The kinetic energy alone would. Coastal barriers are already engaged," another human reported. "Evacuation protocols in low-lying areas are proceeding according to plan. Emergency services are in position." Captain Nix watched in amazement as the humans coordinated their response. They had planned for this. Not just planned. They had built their entire civilization expecting such catastrophes. Their architecture, their infrastructure, their social systems, all were designed to bend rather than break under conditions that would shatter most societies. The quake triggered landslides in the mountains and ruptured several gas lines, creating fires that burned hot enough to register on the Starweaver's orbital sensors. Rather than flee these compounding disasters, human emergency teams moved toward them. "They're going into the danger zones," Zara observed, her voice filled with wonder. "Not robots or drones. Actual humans." "Of course," Sarah replied, coordinating with emergency teams. "People need help, so we help. That's what we do." The aliens watched as humans, protected by what seemed like laughably inadequate safety gear, ventured into conditions that their sensors declared absolutely lethal. They extracted survivors from collapsed structures, contained chemical spills, and fought fires in the middle of continuing aftershocks. "Your species' approach to emergency response is unprecedented," Captain Nix said, watching a team of firefighters enter a burning building that registered temperatures high enough to melt some metals. On most worlds, the protocol would be to isolate the affected area and wait for conditions to stabilize. Sarah looked up from her terminal, surprise evident on her face. "Wait, while people need help. That's not our way. Besides, conditions rarely stabilize on their own. You have to actively work to make things better." As the crisis continued, the alien delegation witnessed something even more remarkable than the emergency response itself: the reaction of the general population. There was no panic, no breakdown of social order. Instead, communities organized themselves, setting up support systems, sharing resources, and helping their neighbors. "Your citizens," Dr. Kern observed, "they're not just surviving this disaster. They're actively working to mitigate it. without official direction. Humans are at their best in a crisis, Sarah explained. Something about adversity brings out our strongest traits: cooperation, innovation, determination. We've learned through history that we're stronger together. The next several hours were a masterclass in disaster management, but not in the way the aliens expected. Instead of trying to control or contain the natural forces at work, the humans focused on adapting to them, working around them, and protecting what mattered most: their people. When the immediate crisis began to subside, the damage was substantial but far from catastrophic. Buildings designed to flex had swayed but not fallen. Underground infrastructure built to absorb movement had shifted but not shattered. Emergency systems had activated automatically, preventing cascading failures. Assessment. Captain Nix asked her science team. The energy released by this event, Dr. Kern reported, was equivalent to several atomic weapons. The fact that their civilization is still functioning is, well, it defies our models of societal resilience. Not just functioning, Zara added, monitoring communications channels. They're already starting repairs. Some businesses are reopening. Children are being released from emergency shelters to return home. They're treating this like a normal occurrence. Because for us, it is, Sarah said, joining them after coordinating with the recovery teams. Earth has never been a gentle planet. We learned long ago that we couldn't prevent natural disasters, but we could prepare for them, adapt to them, and help each other through them. Captain Nix's crystalline structure hummed with revelation. This is why you've survived on this world. Not just because of your physical adaptations, but because your entire society has evolved to meet these challenges. You don't just endure, you expect adversity and prepare for it as a community. More than that, Sarah replied, a quiet pride in her voice. We learned from each disaster, improve our responses, build better systems. Each challenge makes us more resilient, not less. It's how we've always done things, from our earliest days of huddling in caves during storms to building earthquake-resistant skyscrapers. As the aliens watched the recovery efforts continue through the night, they began to understand something profound about the species they had encountered. Humans hadn't just survived on their death world. They had turned the very challenges that should have destroyed them into catalysts for growth and development. The crisis had revealed more about humanity than any cultural exchange session could have. It showed not just what humans could endure, but how they faced adversity, together, with determination, innovation, and an unshakable will to protect and help one another. And as Captain Nix updated her report to the Galactic Federation, she realized that the classification Deathworld had never been more inappropriate. Earth wasn't a planet of death. It was a forge continuously tempering and strengthening the remarkable species that called it home. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Federation's High Council was unlike any in recent memory. Representatives from over 300 species gathered to discuss a single topic: the implications of humanity's discovery. Captain Nix stood before them, her crystalline form reflecting the light of 1,000 different atmospheric requirements. Distinguished council members, she began, our classification systems are wrong. Not just about Earth, about everything we thought we knew regarding planetary habitability and species development. The chamber erupted in murmurs. A Class 1 world representative, evolved in the gentlest of environments, raised an appendage. Wrong. Our classifications have served us for millennia. They have limited us for millennia, Nix corrected. We categorized worlds based on our own narrow definition of what constitutes survivable conditions. Earth challenged every assumption we held. The holographic displays activated, showing images from their mission. Humans building cities in regions regularly devastated by earthquakes. Children playing in weather conditions that would trigger evacuation protocols on most worlds. Emergency responders running toward dangers that other species fled from. But the most remarkable discovery, Nix continued, isn't their physical resilience. It's how their harsh environment shaped their development as a species. Every challenge they faced forced them to innovate, to cooperate, to push beyond perceived limitations. Dr. Kern stepped forward, his tentacles moving in precise academic patterns. Their scientific development followed a completely different path from ours. Where we sought to create perfect environments, they developed ways to thrive in imperfect ones. Where we built barriers against natural forces, they learned to work with them. The Council watched footage of human space missions, primitive vessels by galactic standards, but incredible achievements given their starting conditions. They reached space, Zara added, not despite their harsh world, but because of it. Every launch required them to overcome their planet's crushing gravity. Every return tested their heat shields against atmospheric friction that would disintegrate our vessels. And now, Captain Nix said, they stand ready to join the galactic community. The question is, are we ready for them? A diplomatic corps representative spoke up. What do you mean? Surely we would welcome any spacefaring civilization. Would we? Nix challenged. Humans don't think like us. They don't approach problems the way we do. They see opportunities where we see impossibilities. Their very presence will challenge our most basic assumptions. She brought up new images, human proposals for colonies on worlds the Federation had deemed uninhabitable, plans for mining operations in conditions that should have been impossible, designs for spacecraft that seemed to defy engineering logic, yet their calculations showed would work. The council chamber was silent as the implications sank in. Humanity wouldn't just join their civilization, they would transform it. Their presence would force a revaluation of everything from construction standards to emergency protocols to the very nature of what constituted habitable space. There's more, Zora added. They want to help us. Not just share their technology, but teach us their way of thinking. They see our environmental limitations not as weaknesses to be accepted, but as challenges to be overcome. The evidence was undeniable. Human engineers were already collaborating with Federation scientists, developing new materials and technologies that could help other species better withstand harsh conditions. Their medical researchers were exploring ways to help other beings adapt to a wider range of environments. We stand at a crossroads, Captain Nix concluded. We can cling to our old classifications, our comfortable limitations, our established ways of thinking. Or we can embrace this opportunity to grow, to challenge ourselves, to see the galaxy through new eyes. She paused, letting her next words carry their full weight. The humans have a saying, smooth seas do not make skilled sailors. Their harsh world made them stronger, more innovative, more adaptable. Perhaps it's time we learned from their example. The council's deliberations lasted for days, but the outcome was inevitable. The classification system would be completely revised, exploration protocols would be rewritten, and humanity would be welcomed not just as another member of the galactic community, but as teachers. 1 month later, Captain Nix stood on the observation deck of the Starweaver, watching as the first joint Human Federation expedition prepared to explore a world previously classified as uninhabitable. The human crew members moved with their characteristic confidence, their enthusiasm infecting even the most cautious alien scientists. Ready to make history? Dr. Sarah Chen asked, joining her at the viewport. She had been appointed as the chief liaison between humanity and the Federation, a role she approached with typical human optimism. I believe we already have, Nix replied. Your species has changed everything. The galaxy will never be the same. Sarah smiled. Good. Change means growth. Growth means life. And life. She gestured to the harsh world below, where others saw only death and danger, but she saw possibility. Life finds a way. As the expedition began its descent, Captain Nix reflected on how far they'd come from that first startling discovery of life on a Class 13 world. The humans hadn't just survived their death world. They had mastered it, and in doing so, had shown the galaxy that the only true limits were the ones you accepted. The age of limitation was over. The age of adaptation had begun.